So hello and welcome to 2021. It's been quite the year, and I'm really excited today to launch our career series this year with a panel of some really remarkable external recruiters who are no doubt going to share some incredibly valuable perspectives from where they're sitting and share how they've experienced the pandemic and hiring and changes. So let's get right into it. I'm Cindy Cornell. I'm the career coach for working professionals here at the Yale School of Management. And today I'm really excited to invite back friends of the school and also an alum of SOM. So first, Shelley Fust is joining us from Korn Ferry in Los Angeles, and she's an expert in the global energy industry. We have Brian Joyce from here in Stamford, Connecticut. He's with Korn Ferry as well in global healthcare services. Financial services, we've got Sarah Burley-Reed from Spencer Stewart, and she is actually reaching us today, not from New York, but from her ski house in Vermont. And finally, we've got our own alum who is an expert in sustainability recruiting, Ellen Weinreb, class of '98 here. So let me welcome them all to the screen here today. So thanks so much for being here, everybody. 2020, wow, that was kind of a fun year. A few of us had gotten together with a smaller group of students, actually, the first week of lockdown. If we can think back to, kind of March of last year, we were to have gotten together in person. Instead, we wound up turning on a dime and having our first kind of Zoom presentation of the year, I think, at SOM. And here we are now, not quite, but approaching a year later, and we've learned a lot, and a lot has changed, and a lot has stayed the same. So let me actually just kick this off by asking each of you to share a little bit about, kind of where you're sitting and what you've seen, and a little bit about your practice, and then we can get into a little bit more of questions and answers that might be helpful to folks that are participating today. And I'll say that as well for folks that are actually listening. If you have questions, I'm sure you do, please put them in the Q&A so we can, after our, kind of our discussion and our comments, we can get in and answer some of those for you as well. Sound good? Awesome. So Shelley, why don't we start with you, since I had you at the top of the list on the panelist list, alphabetical.
Sure, Cindy, thank you very much. So Shelley Fust, I'm actually a senior client partner at Korn Ferry here in Los Angeles. I actually have multiple areas that I focus on in terms of my search practice. I'm part of our energy and infrastructure practices. My work in the energy sector is primarily with the energy utilities, as well as with the renewable energy companies, both the technology as well as development companies in those sectors, and all the ancillary technologies and development that goes in and around that area. And I also lead our global sustainable solutions practice. So I'm sure Ellen and I will have a lot of the same perspectives on this part of the industry. So in that context, I work with organizations to help recruit chief sustainability officers, and also do a lot of work in the NGO space as well, with organizations that are focused on both climate as well as energy transformation.
Fabulous. Thank you, Shelley. Brian, you want to dive in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Cindy, for the third year I think I've done this. It's always been enjoyable and rewarding. So I'm Brian Joyce. I'm a senior client partner in the healthcare practice at Korn Ferry, and spent 10 years on the provider side of the medical equation, and about 8 years now on the payer side. And because now I can speak payer and provider, I work a lot in whether it's private equity-backed healthcare services or the payer provider. So it's been a very interesting year. A lot of macro changes, as you can imagine, with COVID-19, and also with CMS finally reimbursing for telemedicine and the shift to virtual worlds and everything else. So it's been extremely busy. We have a lot of insight. I'm happy to dive into that a little bit later.
Fabulous. Thank you. Sarah?
Great. Well, thank you again, Cindy, so much for having us all here today. We're thrilled to be with you. And as Cindy said, I'm Sarah Burley-Reed. I'm with Spencer Stewart. I'm a partner in our financial services practice, usually based in New York, but today I'm in a far-flung location in Vermont. But I specialize, I'm part of financial services, as I said, but I really specialize primarily in investment management and wealth management. So I work with all different kinds of organizations in and around the investment world, from large traditional asset managers to alternatives firms, to wealth management businesses, to family offices, and to endowments and foundations. So it really runs the gamut, but all organizations that are somehow involved in the investment world. And I certainly do a lot of work in executive search and recruitment, but also serve as a leadership advisor to different types of organizations around financial services. And my background prior to working in executive search at Spencer Stuart, I was a management consultant for most of my career. So before joining Spencer Stuart in 2002, I worked with a number of different management consulting firms specializing in serving the financial services industry.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sarah. And last but not least, Ellen, thank you so much for coming back to SOM today.
Sure. So I graduated SOM in '98. And at the time I was the kind of known on campus as the person who was interested in sustainability and wanted to make that my career in corporate social responsibility. And I did an internship at LL Bean working on their human rights. And then went into consulting pretty much independently. I was at IFC and Nike and Levi Strauss and did a lot of sustainability consulting. And around the time my daughter was born, I wanted to go into a field that was going to provide for me for the long run. Like when my daughter was born, it was a time to kind of reset. So I decided to go into recruiting and in this space. And so I've been a recruiter since about 2006. So it's been a while, 15 years in recruiting.
Sounds similar to me. I also did that shift in 2006, and that's when I became a full-time coach after my career in finance and operations globally. So kids do that to careers, right?
Yes.
And that's actually a really wonderful thing to share, is that, you know, even when we have a reset or an adjustment for family reasons or not, there's a lot of people right now in 2020, 2021, early 2021 who have, you know, kind of a self-imposed sabbatical, or they might have been active in a search and things slowed down and stopped as we know at the beginning of 2020. They kicked back up a little bit. How would you, and I'm happy for anyone to dive in here and answer this, though Ellen, you might have a perspective to start. How do you talk about a potential gap in your resume? How do you own that in a way that you as recruiters will still look at that person as a viable and credible candidate?
I think it might be how the candidate talks about it. So not as a detractor, but you know, I had a shift in my priorities for a couple of years, or, you know, for a decade. It's like, you know, it was important for me to wear the whatever it is, but to say it with confidence.
Absolutely.
Yes, I think I will just jump in too. I mean, I think that's very true. I think to be just really honest about why you had a break in your career and what you were doing during that period. I think it's really important to talk about that period as one that's been very productive. So whether that's productive in a family sense or productive in a work and volunteer sense, in a less formal way, I think always showing yourself to be a productive person is important, and that you weren't just, you know, sick of working or something like that, because that doesn't necessarily reflect well and looking at a new opportunity.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I love that there's so many opportunities in the world that we're in right now to even do some research and stay abreast with what's happening currently with courses on LinkedIn Learning or Coursera or edX, or there's so many MOOCs and other open source sources to kind of keep your skills up. And that's actually something else I'd love to kind of just, you know, ask you guys at a high level. We've all been through something really amazing together with this global pandemic. So we've all experienced experienced the same thing, though we've experienced it, many of us, quite differently. I'm curious, how you viewed this transition for yourselves as executive recruiters, and looking at your client bases and the relationships you had, and you had a front row seat to some of the challenges, the big challenges that these organizations were having. And you also then were looking at it with some clarity of distance because you weren't in those organizations. So that transition that they went through is probably really helpful to you in helping candidates to get ready. So would you guys like to comment on what you observed?
Sure.
Go ahead, Brian.
Happy to touch upon that. And also keep in mind, there's another layer there. There was a lot of social unrest. So we have a lot of clients that are not only trying to figure out a productive way to work in a remote capacity and how to continue to move the strategic and visionary agenda forward, but also diversity, inclusion, and equity. So a lot of our clients have been building that segment up and just trying to, and so, I think it'll be interesting to see the cultural impact on organizations, right? So first generation is now. You've already met your colleagues around the water cooler. You have those relationships. You're in a remote environment and you're extremely productive. So when we start to see hiring in a remote capacity and not being able to meet individuals and therefore not being able to get up to speed in the culture that the companies work very hard to create, what does that mean second generation of workforce and moving forward? So it's an interesting impact. And also just the behavioral health component as well, of working through a pandemic and the additional stresses that our lives have now overlaid into our current day jobs, and then navigating that. So it's been an interesting macro environment for sure.
And I was going to say too, in fact, thank you for bringing up the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, because obviously that's been a very critical set of discussions with our clients and real changes in those organizations. But I think that also organizations are having to be very creative from a recruitment standpoint. I think we all have the luxury as recruiters that, between ourselves and our computer, we can pretty much go offline or go online and really do everything that we had done before in our office. So we really have the luxury of being able to work on a remote basis fairly easily. I think the challenge is for a lot of our clients really trying to determine how they go through a recruitment process and interviewing, and do that in an effective way when this is really your only means of interviewing candidates. So, I think we've all been very creative over the last year in helping to counsel our clients on being able to use the internet for interviews and the various technologies. And in many cases, our clients have been very successful, even hiring CEOs without having the opportunity to have in-person meetings. Now that becomes a lot more challenging at the highest levels in an organization. And we've done everything from recruiting or videotaping interviews so that boards can have a chance to watch the candidates before they even have a chance to interview them. In one case, we had a CEO search where in August, in one of the hottest parts of the country, they were having to do outside interviews and had candidates who then would have to go back and quarantine for 2 weeks who were sitting CEOs in organizations. So you can tell that a lot of people have had to be very resilient in the way that they engage in this process. And I think we've all been very pleased with just how resilient our clients have been and how resilient candidates have been. In many cases, coming into an organization and having to onboard and having to engage with teams and never having the opportunity as yet to see them. So that's where we're really seeing a lot of very strong leadership skills and creativity in trying to figure out how you engage with a new team and a new organization using this media exclusively.
I love what you shared. I want to comment really quickly. I love what you shared about being thoughtful about what the employer is going through, because there are people too, right, that are living through this global pandemic and working at home with their families and dealing with kids in school and members of their family who might be ill or hospitalized. So I know I've had to encourage lots of people to kind of slow down and bring back your humanity, because that person's going through some challenging things too. So thanks so much for both of you, Brian and Shelley, for bringing in those really macro issues that are so important to all of us. Sarah, you were going to share something?
Yes, I mean, just to echo what you just said, Cindy, I think we've all probably had a client or a candidate along the way during this period that called us up and said, well, I have COVID, so I can't do the interview. I need to hold off for a couple of weeks or something like that. So yes, I mean, it's really affected. It has affected everyone. I was just going to add on to what Shelley had said. The fact that one thing this whole period has really brought to light is the great importance of adaptability and embracing of change. And so when our clients are looking at talent these days and thinking about who they might want to hire for a role, that is really top of mind, right? Who can come into our organization and roll change and help the team adapt to change and think differently about how they manage and communicate, and who can help us figure out what the future is going to look like when nobody knows what it is going to look like, right? Who can help us just think about how we adapt to that future state. So, and I think that all levels. I mean, certainly, of course, when we're looking at people who are leaders of organizations, that's important, but it's also important for younger talent too. And people who are mid-career, it's important everywhere to know that when you bring a new person on board, they are going to be able to deal with that new world environment.
Yeah. Sarah, I just want to let you know and let others know that your audio is a little bit jumbled there. And that's part of going through this COVID world where these trunk lines were not designed for this much information leaving our homes. They were designed to come in. So hopefully that resolves itself in a few minutes, but it was hard. And I want to acknowledge that for the other participants. Love what you're sharing though around how will we actually work together? Where will we fit in? And I think that's super important for folks. We were talking about this a little bit before we started the live session today, that again, people look for jobs that they're aware of in places they've always looked, and we're relating with each other differently. And a couple of books that are on my bookshelf right now that I'm actively going through. One is by SOM alum Jeff Schwartz. It's called Work Disrupted: Opportunity, Resilience, and Growth in the Accelerated Future of Work. And he's certainly talking about in that book, how do we relate differently and how do we move through some of these these disruptions in the workforce to move into bigger and more productive places. And indeed, what he's shown in some of the stories he shared is that after each major disruption, and in our case here, it's COVID and moving everything online, more jobs have been created, not jobs being taken away, but more and different jobs. So really, what's coming is important. And the other book that I was going to mention that I have on my right here actually is by our SOM faculty member, Marissa King, called Social Chemistry: Decoding the Patterns of Human Connection. So that was the other part of what you were sharing around how do we connect with each other? So what will we be doing and how will we be bringing it all together to create value as the SOM mission goes? We're educating leaders for business and society. So how are we leaving the world better through our work? So love that you brought those ideas in as well. Ellen, did you have something to add in on this topic as well, since you're a lifelong SOMer?
Well, I think one thing that I'm noticing is that like a polarization in many aspects. One is that there are poor people that are poorer, and there are rich people that are richer as a result of this pandemic. Or there are people who were working more because there are no longer the same boundaries of this is I show up to the office, this is when I leave. So most people that I talk to that are working, that were working hard, say that they're now working harder and they're working more hours. So there's some people who are working more, and then there's other people who are working less. And then industries, there's some industries that are booming, like Amazon, e-tail, online retailers, and tech. And then there's others like the obvious ones like travel and retail that are really hurt. So I think that's one of my findings, is that there's a lot of polarization.
Yeah, there absolutely is. I'm curious, and I know what's on the minds of many people who've logged in today they're looking for their next new opportunity, and they're trying to figure out where they fit in. And a lot of folks, and I know we've talked about this in the past, typically go to job boards and things like that. What's your best advice for folks in terms of, at a high level, whatever you want to bring forward first, about getting a job in 2021? Shelley, you look like you're chomping at the bit to share.
Yeah, no, I think that, for all of us, certainly LinkedIn, tends to be a great source from a professional recruitment standpoint. So I would certainly encourage everyone, if they're interested in considering new careers, to really think about their LinkedIn profile and making sure that that's as robust as possible. And also to the extent that there are other comments on that LinkedIn profile in terms of who do people follow, and really being thoughtful about those issues, and recognize that that begins to create a more holistic picture of who you are and where your interests lie. And those are areas that we certainly rely on. Obviously, for all of us on the executive search side, we also have our own research and do a lot of very discrete research, because many of the individuals that we're looking for are not in the market looking. So that's a little bit of a different process. But certainly LinkedIn tends to be one of the more robust networks from a professional standpoint. And there are certainly others, but I think that's one of the major ones that's a place to really focus.
Yeah, I love LinkedIn as an adjunct to the resume. It gives you an opportunity to share a little bit more about who you are as a person and what you care about. And so awesome. We do have a really wonderful resource on the career site for SOM on the alumni portal. There's a course that I highly recommend, Land the Perfect Job with LinkedIn. And it really does go through how LinkedIn, what's going on behind the scenes in LinkedIn. So if you've not checked that out and you're on the call today, I would highly encourage you to go peek at that and make sure that you click on the SOM link to get the discount.
So I would add to that a little bit as well. Everyone has a desire of an industry to go towards. So look at your industry groups. There's a lot of postings as well in that VP level that sometimes doesn't quite make it to executive search. And they also internally, from a budgetary perspective, they want to go out for 30 days on their own at times before inquiring the expense. LinkedIn has also launched a lot more AI recently. And so they're getting smarter on matching candidates with potential opportunities. So the criteria and keywords that you put in your LinkedIn will be able to heighten your visibility to certain recruiters, in-house talent acquisition individuals. And also look at LinkedIn as, Rome wasn't built in a day. We all work on LinkedIn on a daily basis, and it's taken many, many, many years to add, refine, and evolve. So if you just go out there and get referrals, get recommendations, have an old boss or a colleague or an old direct report, put a recommendation, provide a recommendation to a couple of people, it just makes your profile a little bit more robust. That certainly will help you.
I second what Brian's saying about the reviews. The other is the feed, the LinkedIn feed. So, making connections to people, posting on your feed, or being active in terms of liking or commenting. I think that people are going to that feed more than employers or recruiters are going more towards that than in general than Facebook and other forms of social media. So that's something to consider, is using LinkedIn as a social media feed, and then also pay attention to your privacy settings. And do you want to share your contacts or your links, and who do you want to be able to see your just all the details of the privacy settings are a lot more detailed than they used to be. And also know that your what you're obviously you've heard this before, but what you're posting on social media is available to anyone, including recruiters and employers.
Absolutely. I'd also like to remind people that careers are long. When I started my career, the internet didn't exist in the way that it looks today. And LinkedIn certainly didn't exist. And even just this week through LinkedIn, I've had conversations with two people that I worked with in the early 1990s, which is, just kind of crazy. to be able to have this really robust network of people that care about you, even though they might not have talked to you in a couple of years. So super to have an active profile so people can find you. Sarah, did you have something you wanted to add in on this idea?
No, that's fine. I'll let you keep going. Can you understand me better now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So
one more point on that topic also to add, Cindy, is that all of the recruitment firms, whether it's a large multinational like Korn Ferry or Spencer Stewart, or I'm sure Ellen's business as well, also has their own websites, and likely, so to Brian's point about doing the research, you know, it's also doing the research on who are the individuals that are doing recruiting in the space that's of interest to you, and find ways to network with them or to put your resume on their websites. And to do that, that also brings more visibility to your credentials and interests. So being proactive on a number of levels and to do the homework and the networking is also really important, especially these days.
That reminds me, so don't pay for a service, okay? I guess I'll throw that out there. I've seen an increase over the last year of these form letters that come to me, and I almost instantaneously hit delete. Sometimes I'll try to read it, and it takes 3 paragraphs before they actually tell you their industry and their functional skill set. And they get your name wrong and they get your title wrong because they're buying it from a service. So I would not advise to go down that road. Now, also, sometimes building relationships with executive search recruiters takes time, and it's a reciprocal relationship. Sometimes we reach out for you looking for recommendations, referrals. Might not be an opportunity for you at that moment, given where you are in your career, whether or not you're ready for a transition. But if you can call back, establish that relationship, provide some referrals, then we remember that, and then you're on a different level, if you will. And if you're having difficulty getting the attention of a recruiter, think about talking to an old boss. We all have bosses, and we all have prior bosses. They might be a little bit more established in their career. They might have relationships with executive search firms, and they would be happy to give you a warm referral. So if I have an individual I've been working with for years, and they reach out and say, hey, Brian, can you spend 10 minutes with Sally? Well, I'm going to now talk to Sally where I would have possibly have erased her blank form outreach. So as much as you can make that a warm referral and connection, it really is meaningful.
So important. I'm so glad that you said it, because so many people come into coaching conversations with me and they're so excited. They've got their resume, it's done, or their LinkedIn profile is done, and it's done for them. And it's not tailored to the organization that they're really excited about. And, you know, love that you shared that if you know that it wasn't written for you, you're not so excited to read it. So we really need to use that very quickly to create that first connection that will have you leaning in, excited to turn the page and have a look at the resume.
And use that little, when you invite somebody via LinkedIn, you have, and I forget how many characters, 150, 200 characters, whatever it might be. Personalize that message. Don't just fire off a blind, invite, because again, that might be met with the same fate of either, delete or accept. But if there's this little excerpt saying, hey, listen, we don't know each other, but you're in my industry and I'd love to be on your radar screen, whatever, just make it real, make it personable, and have it so that we click accept. That certainly also helps my experiences.
Nice. I want to kind of I'm looking through some of the questions that are coming through, and I want to make sure that we address things that are on the minds of the people that are attending today. One thing that I've noticed this year is that even when companies are in a hiring freeze, they might be putting out a request for information from people because they're anticipating hiring opening back up. So that networking is definitely happening, even though hiring isn't necessarily happening right now. So that's something that I've noticed. What else have you noticed in terms of, kind of this past year and recognizing that for a period of time, things kind of just stopped for a little bit as we were all trying to, get our bearings. I've certainly noticed a lot more conversations I'm having with people on negotiating multiple job offers. So I've seen things picking up from where I'm sitting. What are you guys seeing? And is it dependent on function or industry?
Happy to start there, because I think I think especially in the energy industry around renewables as well as sustainability and ESG, there's just been a heightened focus and acceleration of opportunities in both of those sectors. So certainly from the energy utilities as well as the power developers on the renewable energy side, so much activity, so much momentum, and a recognition kind of across the board that from a climate standpoint, that transition into a cleaner energy environment is critical. So whether it's things around grid modernization, grid resiliency, new technologies, renewable power, energy storage, all of those are very robust areas. Also in the areas of sustainability and ESG, again, the good news is with our new administration coming in, huge momentum, huge opportunity, including, there in the Northeast, one of our clients, Ørsted, which is the offshore wind company. So you're seeing new technologies, new very robust technologies being really supported even by things like retroactive tax credits that are really boosting an industry that's just sort of in its, early stages and will become very prolific. So these are the areas that, and we hear all of the discussion around these areas creating new momentum, new opportunities in the market. And those are clearly opportunities for new entrants and for people who have very broad skill sets, certainly sustainability and ESG. And, I know Ellen will have a perspective too. That's a very wide skill set. So everything from, the financial, skills around, impact investment to government regulatory affairs, communications, diversity, inclusion, and equity. All of those are part of, the whole environment, social governance issues that are just front and center for corporations worldwide.
Yeah, and corporations outside of, energy and other kind of traditional green spaces. So banking and many others are looking at that as well. Ellen, what do you want to add in around what you're seeing in the industries that you're serving?
Right. Well, what I would echo what Shelley was saying about ESG specifically and the alignment with SOM, because it is in that intersection of what SOM was founded for and financial markets with and that area is booming, particularly in private equity. But we're also doing searches on the corporate side, and so to get internships and experience in that, there's just a lot of opportunity. It's a big growth area.
Let me just add one more comment about the roles in corporate. One of the things that I tell my clients is that the organizations around sustainability and ESG are one of the ideal roles to really bring in your high potential talent and to train your high potential talent and create new leaders, because there really aren't any other functions in an organization that have as much opportunity to influence up and down and inside and out in an organization. And they're typically relatively small groups. But the ability to use that as a training ground for your future leaders is just a tremendous opportunity. And we're beginning to see companies do that.
Nice. So they're really cultivating skill sets that hadn't historically existed. And SOM and what we're learning here and sharing with one another here is a rich and fertile ground to kind of build some of those relationships. Awesome. Speaking more of some of the questions, sometimes candidates may want to signal a few different players within a sector or an intersectional space versus just an organization. What would you guys say around refining your application materials or your networking strategy or even your LinkedIn to, kind of target a little bit more broadly? Because clearly, more than one person is going to be looking at, for example, a LinkedIn profile. What are your thoughts there, where you might be open to a couple of different things?
One piece of advice I have around this is that you want to be not too broad and not too narrow, and finding that right fit in terms of the job search. And I always recommend honing in on 3 to 5 paths. So it's like, okay, so I want ESG and private equity might be, and I'm focused on impact investing. So is that too narrow? And it helps to have either a coach or an accountability partner or another friend who's also looking for a job, and you can share your best practices, but it helps to have somebody to check in on with and continually hone in on, am I too narrow and am I too broad, and do I need a shift, and do I need to put this, path number one combined with path number two, and continually tweaking it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Ellen, is to have somebody else do it with you, because we tend to really, when we're navel gazing, and I love the quote that Stephen King has shared, that we need to, as writers, kill our darlings. We sometimes get so excited about what we've said, and we have to remember our application materials aren't for us, they're for the people that we're reaching out to. So when somebody sends me a resume, I'll ask them, who am I when I'm reading this, right? I need the job description, or I need something about the company, so I know, how I might be, what I might be looking for, and what the problems are and the challenges are that the company has that you might be able to solve. So really having those accountability partners, and then where there's those multiple tracks, making sure that if I say this over here, it's not going to actually be counterproductive or pushing somebody away that might be in one of those other places as well. So accountability is super helpful there. Sarah, what about you? What are you seeing out there, kind of in the broader sense, in terms of people? Because you cover, finance, wealth management. It's such a big area.
Yes, sure. And I'll start talking, Cindy. And if people can't hear, please just raise your hand or something. I really don't want to disrupt the flow of this panel. So let me know. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm. There's a little teeny bit of distortion, and we can hear you much better than before.
Okay, good. Yeah, so in financial services, I would say, we've seen a number of developments, and I don't think any of these will be terribly surprising. The first I'll note is just the greater and greater importance of data and analytics and digital across financial services, and that certainly plays in with asset management and wealth management, but broader and consumer financial services and other areas of finance. So the strength around data and analytics, if it's one that you have, is one to emphasize, or one to grow if you don't have it and feel that it might be important in the specific sector of interest for you. Within investments, we've seen a big uptick in recruiting in private investments. And Ellen referred to this as well, especially on the ESG side. But private equity, private debt, has had increasing focus and interest because there are a lot of great investment opportunities out there, whether you're in the institutional asset management world or the private wealth world. And then, of course, ESG and impact more and more is of interest to our clients across a number of different areas. Distribution within asset management is evolving enormously given the new virtual world that we're in, and the importance of how data affects sales and marketing and client engagement. So modern skills around distribution are really important and are a huge focus of recruiting and assessment in the investment world. And then, of course, as others have said, diversity is top of mind always. Not just bringing a diverse profile to the table as a candidate, because everybody's different. Not everybody's going to have what people are looking for when it means diverse, but showing that that's important to you, and then that's something you want to help the organization continue to promote and advance. We've also seen a real focus at the board level on bringing on different perspectives onto the board, more diverse perspectives.
Awesome. So that might lead into two different questions. I'm kind of curious, across all industry, with this great focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, where it may not have existed culturally as predominantly as it is today, is it possible for people who aren't, kind of classically trained in that area in those to move in, and how would they articulate their skills and be seen as viable and credible candidates for those types of DEI responsibilities? Anyone?
Nobody. I mean, DEI is really hard to. So I think what you're saying is, how would you get into a new field if you don't already have that experience? Yeah. And DEI is one, or ESG. I mean, these are the things that we're talking about today. And in general, it's hard to make a big shift in a career. So to do a 180 is because, let's say you have 20 years experience doing something and all of a sudden you want to start somewhere else, and you can't really start at the bottom, and you're willing to start at the bottom, like, okay, I'll take a manager level job, but you've got somebody who just graduated from college who's really excited about that, and they're most likely going to get the job over this other person. So the advice is, if you do make a shift and want to make a shift, you have to do it in steps or in small steps.
I would add that within the
Go ahead,
DNI,
Brian.
if I'm interpreting this correctly, because it's an area of opportunity that all organizations now need to have that functional area as this independent breakout, that if you are within any of the subspecialties of human resources, especially organizational design, you can specifically go into a chief diversity officer or get into diversity, equity, inclusion as your primary function. And that is transferable across industry given the enormous need. So within healthcare, we're seeing a lot of our clients build out this function, a broader bench strength, and the candidates don't have to come from healthcare. So it's something that can transcend any industry, having that functional area within HR. But then there are, of course, exceptions to the rule. You could be involved with a not-for-profit, a community charitable organization, and that has a diverse workforce and community for which it serves, and you're a person of color. You could also shift that and utilize that into that function. So there's opportunities for sure.
What I think I'm hearing is that, and Shelley, we'll dive in to hear you in a second. We're really understanding the skills needed and the outcomes that you've achieved before, and translating those into whatever the new organization is. But really, kind of, it's not about you; it's about them and what you're going to be able to do for them, and can you actually tell that story? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Shelley.
Yeah. Let me also say too that I think this is an area where it's really incumbent upon us as recruiters to keep our clients as open as possible as we go through a process, as we develop a sourcing strategy, and as we bring candidates forward, that we are very focused on making sure that we can be as inclusive as possible in the pools of candidates that we present to our clients. So in many cases, that is sort of looking a little bit outside the very narrow sort of functional role that may be defined in the context of a search, to really look at, well, what about, so if someone maybe hasn't been a controller, maybe they've been in FP&A or other areas that may also be relevant. So being able to continue to have those conversations with our clients so that we have the ability to be more robust and be able to bring in a more diverse and inclusive pool of candidates to be considered.
And we're also seeing clients go through unconscious bias training prior to interviewing candidates, especially at the executive leadership level, to make sure that they go into their finalist or just their candidate interview panels, having been thoughtful of that. That's required by many clients now.
And yes, and
I would
are
Go
definitely,
ahead, Ellen.
sure. So employers are definitely asking for, I'm hearing that more, and how employers define that, or how that's built in, definitely shifts a lot. Like how they define, if they say they want a more diverse slate of candidates, I say, what are, are you talking about ethnic diversity or diversity of thought? How do you define it? And how do you track for it? So if you are a diverse candidate, I had a candidate, if you're diverse in any way, and diversity of thought, just define any way, I would celebrate that. I think if you're gay, do you want to be in the closet or out of the closet? Because if you're out of the closet, it actually increases your chances of getting a job. Whereas in the past, it would decrease your chances of getting a job. And so that's just something to consider.
Absolutely. Sarah, do you have a point of view on this one?
No, I absolutely I absolutely agree with Ellen, what you're saying about celebrating the kind of diversity that you bring to the table and really being able to articulate what makes your background different or special in comparison to whoever else is at the organization.
Yeah, so owning your story and sharing it relative to the population that you're trying to join. This is a conversation I had recently with someone who was shifting roles from the Northeast to the Midwest. And we were talking about the differences in so many things from where she was leaving to where she was going, and how that was going to impact her leadership and the challenges that she'd be facing, and what were the skills that she was bringing forward that would be addressed there, and perhaps celebrated there in ways that they hadn't been necessary as much, kind of here in the Connecticut area. So absolutely, it has to be transferable from, again, their point of view. Peeking at some of the other questions that are coming in, curious to understand career opportunities in let's see, the transition that we're in right now with regard to political our political government here in the United States. There's new opportunities, clearly. What are we seeing, and how does one prepare to, kind of negotiate into that? And it would actually not just be relative to, kind of energy, but also, I mean, clearly this is affecting everything, healthcare and finance. And there were some interesting added addendums to the stimulus bill that require certain disclosures that weren't previously made, and that's going to impact how business is done and who invests in what. So curious, not just, kind of from the energy and sustainability standpoint, but from everyone, what are you seeing, and how do we want to think about business and hiring and applying and being really qualified candidates as we move, further into 2021?
I'd say, do your homework and consider joining the administration. There's political appointees. There's a lot of opportunity. And when it comes to sustainability related jobs, there's definitely a growth in that area. Corporations are climate change is a burning platform, and they're not backing down on that. And then the investment sector has held steady, and there are a lot of job opportunities there. And then healthcare, obviously, pharma.
Other ideas about how to think about the job, how to think about the job search in 2021?
I would approach it similar than in other searches, right? Create a target list. Where do you want to be? What's your industry? And even from there, now that we know that a lot of our clients are comfortable with recruiting individuals that are not in the geography of the office that has the need, or headquarters or satellite, then it's open territory. So create your target list and create 5 or 10 companies that you want to work for, and then proactively find the VP of Talent Acquisition on LinkedIn for that organization and send an invite, and utilize that box and just give a quick little intro of who you are and why you want to work with them. And if it's if it's a large organization, then reach out to your executive search partnerships and relationships and see if they do work with those organizations. And if you answer that with, I don't have anybody in the executive search field, then take a step back, and every organization lists their practice individuals. So go on to the Bigs, the Spencers, the Corns, the Heidricks, and also like Ellen works and leads a boutique search firm in her area of expertise. So find out those organizations, proactively go on and reach out for them.
Yeah, so we're back to basics. Shelley,
Yeah.
go.
Oh, okay. What I'm going to say is also be open to considering global opportunities. One of the things that we're seeing is the world is becoming a much smaller place and much more global. So especially in areas like sustainability, you've got a number of large corporations as well as sovereign wealth funds in the Asian markets that recognize that this is a huge growth market for them. They also recognize that most of those skills are not resident in their region, and they're looking to North America, they're looking to Europe to be able to import those skills. So for those who can and can do it early enough in their career to get global experience, that just makes you a much more attractive candidate as you move throughout your career.
Shelley, on that point, are you seeing an appetite also for US companies bringing in global talent, or is that kind of at a standstill right now? You're seeing more appetite?
Seeing both, yes.
Okay, fabulous, good. I know there's a number of people on the call today who are going to be happy to hear that news. So it's potentially still
very
going.
Much so.
Okay, good. Sarah.
I mean, we still
Cindy,
have our challenges of visas and being able to bring those individuals in. But for most global companies, they have a process in place and are willing to do that for the right skill sets.
Awesome. Sarah?
Yes, I was just going to add, Cindy, I have a really simple answer to your question about how do you think differently in 2021. And it's, it's back to who are you? It's not about like, how has the world changed? The world has changed, absolutely. And there are going to be new opportunities. There are going to be different kinds of roles, different industries are going to be evolving in new ways. But you still have to go back to the core of who you are as a person and what you're good at and where you're going to be able to add value. Because it doesn't really matter if, there's a greater need for this or that going forward. It's good for you to be aware of that and to know it, but you really have to know yourself and where are your strengths, where are you distinctive, and how can you apply those in this kind of new environment. So just still really important to think about those things, no matter what level of career you're at.
And I love how you kind of brought it back to knowing yourself and how you want to add value. So this is very different from the here's my resume and what can I do for you? Because we all have a lot of problems on our desks right now, and we're probably not going to spend the amount of time it would take to figure out what that person would be really, delighted to be doing and where they'd achieve their greatest potential. So really back to basics. Ellen?
In terms of remote working, which ties to this, is I'm finding that the candidates are more interested in remote working than the clients and the employers. And so there definitely are some employers out there who are saying, now we're opening it up, or regionally, that definitely exists. But there are a greater percentage of candidates who are saying, I don't want to move there. Why can't I work remote? I've been working remote for the past year. It's been going great. So, so that it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out post-COVID. And then in terms of work authorization and immigration, it was very hard in the Trump administration. And I'm thinking, looking forward, that the immigration will be easier and more likely to get work authorization, or the time to get work authorization. It's still, I'm still seeing my clients are saying, are saying they want that person in country. We do searches globally, so usually it's in the region or in the country. And we're also for like, if you're in Europe and you're American, there's tax. You have to pay taxes in the US. I mean, it gets pretty complicated. So oftentimes the employer just says, look, it's too complicated. It's going to add time. I want you to source candidates just in our country.
That's something that's really important. I think a lot of people don't take the time to understand the complexities on the employer side. So again, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, that it's not just all about us, that there are complicated tax issues and other managerial issues, and really understanding what the job is and what you'd be doing on any given Thursday afternoon, and who's resident in country or on the ground that you'd need to develop rapport with. And it's not just people sometimes that are in the company, it's sometimes a broader population that you're interacting with. So that's, I think, again, where a lot of the effort and preparation and research comes in. Brian? You're muted, Brian.
We're having a lot more dialogue around the word co-locate. And what I mean by that is we had a lot of, so typically pre-pandemic, if a client engages in a search and paid us to do a search, relocation was mandatory, at least for all my clients. Maybe 1%. now that's lifted. Co-location is a great way to sell yourself into an opportunity, especially with real estate being so low. If it's a promotional opportunity, you're getting more compensation, you can get an $800, $900 apartment that is in the location that they want, and you can split your time. We're having I'm personally having a lot of clients that are open to that. And then eventually, as the course of their organization's culture shifts, they become remote, and then you can eliminate the apartment, or they require you to relocate, and then just make sure up front that that the relocation assistance pre-negotiated in your initial package. So there's flexibility there, but the word co-location has come up a lot in our dialogue.
Awesome. Awesome. I see there's quite a lot of chatter in both the chat and the Q&A in terms of ideas that are being shared with folks. So love that this has been as interactive as it's been. And I'm also conscious that we're coming up on the top of the hour already. How did that happen so quickly? In the last couple of minutes, just as we're wrapping up here, I just first of all want to say thank you so much again for coming back to us. To our participants, I want to say, these panelists are happy to hear from you. Please, though, as they've asked you to, do your research to know who you're talking to before you reach out to them, and remind them perhaps even what they said here today that was really valuable to you, so that there's that initial point of connection that you can start your relationships from. And to our panelists, I'm curious, if you are willing to share either a piece of advice, please don't forget to, or a funny story about something to please never do, that I think would be really, really useful, because sometimes as people are so focused on getting the job, they sometimes miss what would be an easy win in terms of a faux pas to avoid or to do. Brian, I know you had one.
Real quick. Thank you notes are still in existence. They can be via email, not handwritten anymore, but you have to send a thank you note. I've had candidates eliminated from the process in the last month or two for not sending thank you notes. Remove the distractions. We had a plumber come in for a candidate, and they were overly distracted. They did not move forward in the process. Attire, you can be a little bit more casual, at least in our business, healthcare. Even if you're meeting a CEO, for a gentleman, a button down, no tie, open collar, throw a jacket on if you really want to dress it up, but casual is fine. Understand their culture, and so still just make sure you are prepared. You know who you're speaking to. You have questions at the end of the interview. When an interviewer asks you if you have any questions, and you say, "Well, I think you covered it all," you're dead in the water.
Great advice. Shelley?
And I think you covered it, Brian, but be aware of your surroundings when you're doing video. So if you're at home and don't have an office to be in, either use a virtual background or find another location. You can see one of the things that I do sometimes is I split my bandwidth between the audio and the visual, because it gives me a little bit better opportunity to control that bandwidth usage and be able to have a clear audio as well as a clear video. Being able to just control lighting in the room, but as Brian says, we've all had experiences. In fact, recently on a CEO search, we were doing a recorded interview, and the CEO made a comment that was just extremely inappropriate, especially right in the time of a lot of our Black Lives Matter issues this summer, and he didn't even recognize it. And it was literally something that could have taken him out of the process. And we frankly struggled with whether we gave him that advice and the opportunity to re-record the interview. So you really have to be thoughtful about, again, your audience, your environment, and really come prepared, just as you would if it was an in-person interview.
Nice. Sarah?
Sure. I think one thing that is of utmost importance in these times is to display a ton of positive energy. This is a very difficult time that we're all going through professionally, personally, logistically, and having a smile on your face and an upbeat attitude and a forward-looking mindset goes a long way when you're interviewing and networking. So just keep that in mind.
Beautiful. And last but not least,
Good.
Ellen.
Yeah, just those interviews. I mean, first of all, the camera to have you, eye to eye. I've definitely had interviews where the person thinks whatever. So I mean that should be obvious. But lighting, and camera, eye contact is really important, just like, and also these are interviews, they're opportunities to meet someone. And so just take that as an opportunity, you know, whether you get the job or not, there's, you know, I interview 50 candidates, only one of them gets the job. So those other 49 conversations are conversations I enjoy, and I would hope that candidates are enjoying these conversations, even if they're not moving forward in the process.
Beautiful, beautiful. So look at them as long-term relationships. Careers are long and the world is small. And this might not be the right job today, and it might lead to something even better tomorrow. I've seen that happen over and over again in 2020. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, again, for being here. And Kayla, thank you for manning things behind the scenes for us from Alumni Relations. And I am wishing you all a very healthy and positive and productive and happy 2021. And we'll all be in touch. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Cindy.